Recording.
Okay, we are beginning. Then Dzogchen is the path of spontaneous liberation. And what does that mean? This is something very important because the most basic, for me, difference in Buddhism, distinction taught by the Buddha, was the contrast between Samskrita and Asamskrita, Sankata and Asankata, Diche and Dimache. That is, Samskrita means all that is. What is that?
I don't know, date? I have a date.
Date?
No, I should. Samskrita is all that is created, produced, fabricated, induced, intentional, contrived, conditioned, or compounded. All of that is englobed in a single word. And all that is like that, according to Buddhism, and it's true that it's like that, is impermanent and subject to suffering. Why? Because whatever is impermanent will bring suffering when it dissolves. And whatever is, with all of this, whatever is Samskrita will be in something that can produce attraction or rejection and that is involved with samsara. So automatically, whatever is Samskrita will pertain to samsara. So, if enlightenment were Samskrita, if it were produced, created, fabricated, induced, or contrived, or intentional, or conditioned, or compounded, then it would be part of samsara and it would be impermanent, it wouldn't be a definitive solution for samsara, answer to samsara, and it will be subject to suffering. So, the only way that enlightenment can occur is when it occurs as Samskrita. And when you translate Asamskrita into Chinese, the translation is Wu Wei. Wu means no, and Wei means action, non-action. So, Asamskrita also means beyond action. It's also the same thing. And that means that the only way liberation or enlightenment can be attained is through a spontaneous liberation.
Excuse me, is it this Wu Wei, is it exactly like Lao Tzu describes it in Tao Te Ching? When he says about like the wisdom man acts without acting, and
yeah, that's
that combination.
Exactly,
wow,
that's
thank
it.
you.
Wei Wu Wei will be action through non-action.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. And that is a Chinese translation of Asamskrita. Of course, they chose a Taoist word to translate Asamskrita, and because that was the culture, that was what they had in Chinese.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but then does it mean that the path of renunciation is useless? And the path of transformation is useless? No, it doesn't mean that. It means that when you practice the path of renunciation, if you attain enlightenment, the moment you attain enlightenment, it will be uncontrived. It will be happening spontaneously. And that's how the Buddha attained enlightenment, yeah? He sat under the Bodhi tree and he said, I want to stand up until I attain what I am looking for. And he sat there, and then he had all these visions of Mara, yeah? He said that Mara sent the demons to attack him, and he remained totally aloof, without reacting. He had nothing to protect anymore. Because he was, I mean, either I die or I attain enlightenment, but life is, all this samsara, I can't take it anymore. So I am ready to die. And then he recognized also these things to be illusions, and he remained totally impassive or impassive? Impassive. Then he said that Mara sent the apsaras, which are the musicians of the gods in Hinduism, but in this story they are the daughters of Mara. Yeah? And then they came to seduce him by dancing with scanty clothing, and they were so delightful, and but he remained totally impassive again. And after that he entered a very deep samadhi. Of course, before that he had had the princess of his dream as his wife, and at that time the royal wife came together with a combo of 500 secondary consorts. So you can imagine that the Buddha was quite used to that. That wouldn't really seduce him so much, yeah? And anyhow, then he got into a very deep samadhi, and then he awoke from the samadhi. He came out of the samadhi and saw the morning star. He didn't go like this, yeah, I'm going to attain enlightenment. He just saw the morning star and poke. There was no duality between the star and his perception, and there was no conceptualization that made him believe the star was the morning star in itself. He attained enlightenment uncontrivedly. Yeah, in an Asamskrita way. That was a spontaneous liberation. So he practiced the path of renunciation, but when he attained enlightenment, that was self-liberation. Someone who practices the path of transformation, in the moment when he looks at the cognitive capacity that is experiencing the pleasure or the clarity, then this subject-object duality collapses, like someone who is walking and you put your foot and he trips and collapses, and then that's also spontaneous liberation. So at the end, whoever attains enlightenment attains it through a spontaneous liberation. But when you make of self-liberation the path, then you attain enlightenment much faster. Because you are applying the only method that leads to actual enlightenment as the method to attain enlightenment. From the beginning, you are not practicing something else so that at the end it will happen that something collapses, but you are applying the method from the beginning. So Garab Dorje, the first Buddhist teacher of Dzogchen, when he attained the body of light, or the total transference, there are two versions about it. Manjushri Mitra, his main disciple, was crying desperate that the light of the world had disappeared, had gone beyond, yeah, had attained parinirvana, and then he appeared, Garab Dorje, in a vision of light, and then he transmitted his testament. And his testament was, first of all, direct introduction. Direct introduction means a first recognition of Rigpa, a first glimpse of Rigpa, of Vidya. Avidya is negation of Vidya. Marikpa is negation of Rigpa. Rigpa is the wisdom, non-dual wisdom that reveals the true condition. So, direct introduction is a first glimpse of Rigpa. The path of renunciation begins with the ordinary condition and ends up with emptiness. The path of transformation begins with emptiness. Why? Because when you transform yourself into a deity, you are not aware that the whole of the world or your ordinary perception, your impure vision is empty, then, and that this vision that you are creating is also empty, then you will be putting another layer onto the onion of delusion. Yeah? You believe all the onions are, all the layers are true, and you put another one, and you consolidate and make more false and more complicated your delusion. So you have to begin with this. That's why in Maha Yoga, in Anuttara Yoga Tantra, you begin with the Swabhava mantra. Yeah? You project in Dzogchen terms, it is said, you spread emptiness everywhere. Like saying this is not something authentic. But still, it has to be done in Tantra. Because otherwise, Tantra will become a path of demons. And then you begin with emptiness, and the end is the state of Mahamudra in the new Tantras, or the state of Dzogchen in the old Tantras. And then that means Rigpa. So the end of the path of transformation is Rigpa. In the path of spontaneous liberation, Dzogchen, Ati Yoga, the beginning of the path is Rigpa because it's direct introduction. But that doesn't mean that we have to go through the path of renunciation in order to attain emptiness, and then through the path of transformation in order to attain Rigpa, and then through the path of that, then we will have to go through 3 immeasurable eons at the beginning, then 1 more lifetime after that, and then practice Dzogchen. So in Dzogchen we begin with direct introduction, and that is a glimpse of Rigpa. That is the beginning of the path. But what happens after that? After we have this first glimpse of Rigpa, we come back to the ordinary condition. And again, everything seems so real. Again, the book seems to be in itself a book. And the chair seems to be in itself a chair. And you seems to be in itself you. And each of us seems to be in ourselves.
Yeah.
Also, Acharya, outside, I saw someone spoke here. Acharya Dignaga, Mahayana master, said to remember is always to remember that I was perceiving, that I was experiencing, that I was acting, that I was thinking. It's always, memory is always dualistic, in our dualistic condition. Like if you have an experience which is not dualistic, if you didn't have the experience that you were experiencing, then you cannot remember that. And in Rigpa there is no one experiencing, because there is no subject-object duality. So you cannot remember that from the ordinary condition, from the dualistic condition. So everything seems so real, and you cannot actually remember that, because if you could remember it, in that moment you were absolutely certain that this was the true condition, and all that you had experienced before was like a dream. But then when you come back to the dream, then it seems that the dream is real, and that you cannot even remember, because there was no subject-object duality. So you are in doubt. So how not to remain in doubt? You apply practices for not to remain in doubt. Yes?
Wow.
How? Going back to Rigpa, again and again and again.
What you said directly reminded me of Hinduism. When in Hinduism it said, I'm not the doer, I'm not the one who thinks, I'm not the thinker, I'm not the... So it's like a separation, like really getting aware that all these are things that I experience, but I'm not any of those. And in the same time, I was remembered that the rishis at their rituals, Hindu priests, they had some sort of I don't know, transportation to the Devaloka or something, because they always said they live with a longing for that. So that means they had memory. What would you say about it? Because they said that we're here, and after the ritual, after the trance was over, we have a longing for that reality that we experienced in the process.
Well, there are the real rishis and the pseudo rishis. When the Buddha was enlightened, he didn't say, I discovered a new realization. He said, I discovered the truth of the rishis of ancient times. But the pseudo rishis that were his teachers, they would only go to the formless realms, which are a God's realm, and there you have dualistic awareness, and therefore you can remember it, and then you have a longing for that. And that happens very often to users of psychedelics also.
Exactly.
Yeah. So you have a longing for that.
So it's just another realm, actually.
Yeah. I mean, an infinitude manifests and you perceive it. Otherwise, if it weren't conceptualized, you wouldn't have 4 different Arupa lokas, formless realms. The lowest one is the infinitude of perception, then infinitude of nothingness, then infinitude of neither nothingness nor something, and finally the infinitude where we can not even express it as neither nothingness nor something.
Wow.
They are 4 conceptualizations
like
of an infinitude. So that means that there is a proto-subject object duality and some conceptuality. So that can be remembered. And then you get a longing for that.
Yeah.
And that happens also.
Yeah, because I was thinking about the ancient rishis, not, I don't know, whatever they... Actually, to my understanding, there were only the ancient rishis. So today I would not call anybody a rishi, really. Because they were like almost beyond what we call human, just one step beyond what we call human evolution. So they were like...
Yeah. Of course, the teachers of the Buddha, they were only going to the formless realm. And of course then they could have this longing because there was this duality. But I mean, we could speak a lot about that, but that would take us away from what we want to get out of it, but we are supposed to complete. And that means that first of all we have direct introduction, which is the first glimpse of Rigpa, and then by going back to that again and again, even though we cannot remember that which was beyond duality, it begins to get through, and then you gain certainty even in the dualistic condition. And then you know that that was the true condition, and you know that this is illusion. And then the more familiar you become with that, you begin even in your everyday experience to see this more and more as illusion, as similar to a dream. Like a lucid dreamer, someone who practices dream yoga, and is aware that the dream is a dream, it becomes a little bit like that. So, but this is still not continuing in the state. Well, when you continue in the state, you are in Rigpa all the time, when you manage to continue in the state. And this is the third statement of Karab Dorje, to continue in the state. And how do we continue in the state? Well, in the Dzogchen Padesha Varga, which is the most direct of the 3 series of Dzogchen teaching, in Buddhist Dzogchen, you have texture and togel. Then how is texture? Texture, tek means tied up. For example, if you have a tek...
How is it written, this word?
Okay. Yes. According to the system you use, according to which system you use, In Wiley would be the first. In this another system would be the second, and another system would be the third. So how do you write it? It would have to be in Tibetan.
Google help you.
Yeah.
May Google help me, I'm not sure, but...
You will probably find, if you look in Google, you will have a different explanation. Normally a tekshin, shin is the firewood. A tekshin is a package of firewood which is tied up. And sha is grass. Teksha is a bundle of grass which is tied up. And ch is not the same as ch.
Aha, okay.
Ch means to cut. Ch means to break away. Yeah? So this means that something that is tied up, like the rope or whatever is tying it up, breaks of its own accord. This is why it's self-liberation. If you try to cut it, you assert the cutter and the cut, and then you cannot cut anything. Yeah? Both of them have to dissolve spontaneously in this breaking. So it is said that when the Dharmakaya manifests, subject and object are like feathers entering fire. They instantly disappear upon entering the fire. And that's why everything dissolves, because in order to have a tension, you need two sides that go like this or like that. And then you have tension. When there are no longer two sides, it breaks. And the thought breaks. There are many types of thoughts in the Dzogchen teaching. The most subtle type of thought is called Trimandala in Sanskrit, or Korsum in Tibetan. I translate it as threefold directional thought structure. Yes? Threefold because it involves subject, object, and something in between, which may be experience, action, thinking, etc. Yeah? Then you have the next, is not super subtle, but subtle, is what is called in Sanskrit Artha Samanya and in Tibetan Donchi. And this we can translate as intuitive thoughts. That's how René Descartes and Locke, in England Locke and in France Descartes, called intuitive thoughts. I see the chair and I don't have to think chair. I know it to be a chair. Yeah? It's more visual than auditive, and it has more to do with space than with time. Then we have the third type of thought, which is discursive thought. It's called Shabda Samanya or Drachi. Dra is sound like Dratanjur, the all-penetrating sound tantra. Dra is sound. So Drachi is this type of concept that seems to sound in the mind. They are words one after the other in chains. Yeah? And that's discursive, so it's like an inner discourse. So you have all these different types of thought, and they all dissolve instantly upon self-liberation. There are other types of thought also in Dzogchen, but in this case we are only concerned with those three. We are not concerned with other ones. Yeah. All these three dissolve instantly, and the Dharmakaya manifests. Actually, it's because the Dharmakaya manifests that they dissolve. Subject and object like feathers entering fire. Dharmakaya is illustrated with a sphere. Why? The true condition in Dzogchen is also called Tigle Chempo, total sphere, because a sphere has no angles. Angles exclude what is inside from what is outside. The same Acharya Dignaga, whom we mentioned before, said that concepts are defined by exclusion, apoha, or exclusion of other, aniapoha. White excludes black, right excludes left, up excludes down, human being excludes all that is not human being, woman excludes men, and so on, yeah? So everything excludes, every concept excludes something. A sphere has no angle. It doesn't exclude anything. It doesn't exclude anything. So, yeah, because it has no angles. The true conditions cannot enter into a concept. Because concepts are limited, they exclude. The true condition is the true condition of everything. There is nothing outside the true condition. So you cannot exclude anything. So the only way it can manifest is when all concepts collapse. Together with the first type of avidya, which is not a concept, but the ignorance of the true condition due to the factor of stupefaction that has gone along with the mental stream of sentient beings in time without beginning. Yeah, that also collapses instantly. And then the Dharmakaya manifests, or the Dharmakaya manifests and all that collapses simultaneously. Not one cause of the other, but it happens simultaneously. And this is the self-liberation of structure. Then he said that there are three types of self-liberation in structure, in Dzogchen in general, not only in structure. But the first one and the second one are in structure. And the first one is liberation upon seeing. Liberation is called chandrel. Yeah? So the thought is already established, and I look at the thought. Normally I am trapped in the thought. Yeah? When I have a thought, I get trapped inside. I believe in the content of the thought, what the thought means. Yeah? For example, I believe that Karina has a scarf. Yeah, I believe Karina has a scarf. Yeah, and I say, oh, that scarf is pink. It's what? Oh, it's what material is it?
Skin cover.
Silk.
Let's say silk. Yeah. Oh, this is silk. I believe this is silk in itself, and I cannot. I mean, I'm trapped in this belief that this is silk. So I'm trapped in this thought, inside this thought. If instead of being, if I look at the thought after I already have direct introduction and I no longer remain in doubt, so I am familiar with the true condition of thought. Thought is Dhan energy. The true condition of Dhan energy is Dharmakaya. Then when I am familiar with the Dharmakaya, and I look at the stuff of the thought, at the energy that makes up the thought, at the material of the thought, then Dharmakaya manifests and the thought liberates at the same time simultaneously. So this is the first type of spontaneous liberation. The second type, I am so familiar and I develop so much presence that I notice the arising of the thought when it begins to arise. It may seem to be somehow behind the eyes, and then one movement of attention goes like that, and it liberates with the thought. So the first type is like recognizing an old friend. Imagine that we are in a very dangerous part of a dangerous town. And
in Venezuela. In
Venezuela, I always give the example of Venezuela. In a dark street, and we see someone coming. And I begin to get nervous because it could be someone who is going to do a hold up. Yeah? And I begin to be afraid. What does this mean? Well, to practice Dzogchen, I must be wary of thoughts because I have to recognize them. I cannot allow them to trap me, but I have to see them and recognize them so that they free themselves. They are like a robber or a killer who can harm me. Yes? So I am wary of the thoughts. So I am in this dark street and I turn right to see whether this guy is after me. And it's dark. And then he turns right. And then I turn left. And then he turns left. And he's getting nearer. I don't want to run because then I would communicate my fear to him and that would be worse. Maybe he shot me or something. And then I come under a light. And then I said, wow, it's Luchan. Yeah, Dharmakaya is your innermost true condition. It is like your faith before you were conceived. So, it's more than an old friend, yeah? But the example is an old friend. The second one is like a snake. You make a knot with his body and you let it loose and the knot goes like that. Like that goes the thought in the same way. Or a drawing on water. As you draw it, it dissolves. Yeah, this is the second type of liberation. And the third is like a thief in an empty house. There is nothing to steal, you are no longer wary of thoughts, and the thoughts can no longer deceive you. So this is the third type of liberation. Anyhow, when we become very familiar with structure, we develop a strong capacity of spontaneous liberation, and then we can practice Togel. And then first we practice Togel of daylight, and sunrise and sunset with a certain particular way. We begin to see tigles, and these tigles have to increase to the point that then after we can see figures inside, and then the peaceful and wrathful light is manifest. This is called Rolpa energy. We spoke of Dan energy, which is the energy of the sphere of the mental. Dan Rolpa energy is the visionary, rectifying energy. It's visions which are self-luminous, and they have a particular dimensionality. Chogyam Namkhai gave an example of he saw a vision of Togel which was 5 tigles, a central one here, one here, one here, and one here. In cell energy, this type of energy, there has to be some space between the tigles, or otherwise they will overlap and fuse. But Rinpoche saw these 5 tigles, they were not overlapping,